Yeah, so of course, stage 4 power cuts are going to be with us until at least Saturday morning. This afternoon, the President addressed the issue in Parliament. He did say that some of the big coal-fired power stations are now operating much better than they were, but it's fair to say that we still need a lot more power. We have, of course, committed to a transition to cleaner forms of energy, but coal is going to be in our future for some time to come. During this time of electricity crisis, we're also expecting to hear word of a new board to properly guide the state-owned entity. And I'm joined now by Dr Caryn Abrahams, Senior Lecturer at the Wits School of Governance. Dr Abrahams, thank you so much for your time. There are so many people weighing in on what's wrong at Eskom, who's to blame. But the news that we're going to get a fully constituted board surely is going to mean more minds addressing this very important issue. What are you hearing about how it must be constituted and when we're likely to see a new board?
Hi, Sally, and hi, listeners. So news reports and all sorts of statements from Eskom suggest that a new board will be constituted by at least the end of next week. And that's, of course, no easy task ahead. And good leadership and good governance of an institution is critical to the institution's health. It's absolutely fundamental to having one's eye on every part of the operation, not just high-level decision-making, but as the current CEO has talked about, capacity, technical capacity on the board that will be able to speak to issues that are not just around governance, but also around how to manage facilities, how to generate more capacity. And so that's, I think, the challenge for the next week. And of course, it doesn't really affect the ordinary resident that's trying to cook their food in the evening or get their kids ready for school. But this is why the governance of state-owned institutions matters so much.
Yeah, and it's got to be done right. We need that mix of skills, and there's only a handful of board members currently. Not enough people, not enough skills, so that everyone brings their expertise into the discussion so the right decisions are made. It's interesting to note that John Steenhuisen in Parliament today challenged President Ramaphosa, saying, in 2015 you told us we'd have 2 more years of load shedding. Well, I mean, 7 years later we're having some of our worst load shedding ever. And we've also been told by the President just this week that we should get used to it because it's not going to end anytime soon. All they're going to try and do is try and reduce the severity and the frequency. In your mind, does that mean our dependency on coal is going to last a lot longer than any just transition really should allow?
So this is a global issue, and it's about the fact that the problem is actually our dependency on coal, not that we need, we can squeeze many more years out of the coal abundance we have. So there's talk about massive investment, 500 billion investment into more generation capacity and storage capacity. But it's still working on the same model of extractive energy. I mean, Minister Mantashe's discussion with the mining sector today is case in point. It's suggesting and it's really tricky for South Africa to get out of this coal dependency because it's so much related to the labor market and the mining complex in South Africa. And so having a conversation about the just transition, which is really where we should go, is really much tied to kind of politicized issues about workers and whether there's going to be enough jobs for the next 10 years. And that's not the conversation that should be heading up the conversation about a just transition. It's about that our dependence is really going to get us, and it's across the world, the idea of moving away from coal energies into more renewable energies. That's where the conversation needs to be had. And so we're not hearing those policy conversations coming through fast enough in terms of generating renewable energy, making it possible for ordinary residents to generate their own, possibly sell back to the grid. Those kinds of creative solutions are being stuck in bureaucratic red tape because of the policy prohibitions around energy production.
I was speaking to the Solidarity Union's research unit last night, and they were saying that one of the reasons we're not seeing massive incentives for ordinary people to hook up to solar and, you know, this wheeling concept where you can sell back to the grid, that is a policy issue. It needs to be opened up and opened up fast. And any minister who gets in the way of that needs to be fired. Would you agree that Gwede Mantashe has been a spanner in the wheel?
So I think ministers have a tightrope to walk because they have political concerns as well, and they have various ministries to take care of. And so the mining and resource oversight of those functions are something that he has to balance up with the idea of a just transition. So there's that tightrope to walk, as well as making sound investment decisions. I'm not sure about being fired, but the thing is that these are the kinds of bold conversations that need to be had, not the run-of-the-mill conversations that we've been having that we can roll our eyes at and suggest that we just must get used to it. No, we should not get used to it. There needs to be a fundamental rupture in the way we're talking about policy issues. And unless that happens, then we are in this for a long haul, and we are going to do blackouts or brownouts for the next foreseeable future, the next 2 decades.
I mean, and the reality for the average person who just wants to get home and be able to cook a hot meal at night is that not only are we dealing with load shedding up to 6 hours a day at the moment for some households, we're also told that Eskom wants a 32% increase next year. They've gone to the energy regulator. We know that the energy regulator tends not to grant more than 9–10%. It's still going to be an eye-watering increase, though. And the reality is that in many poor communities, South Africans simply cannot pay anyway. And a lot of them are forced to do those illegal connections. Not all of them, it has to be said. But we have an extreme poverty situation. You know, the president today just talking about how many hungry children there are in this country, how many poor households there are. In that context, and the fact that Eskom has over 400 billion rand in debt, are we looking at the wrong model? I mean, should we get to a point where we say we need to change how we roll out and how we expect certain communities to pay for electricity?
So, I mean, I think there are conversations that needs to be had about the role of province and subnational government in this. Of course, some municipalities, metropolitan municipalities, have agencies like City Power that mediate this conversation for those particular jurisdictions or metros. But I think a more finely grained analysis means that even if there are no agencies, intermediary agencies that supply electricity to metros, etc., there needs to be a way for subnational government and local government to do the kinds of innovative kind of interventions that have been done, for example, by the City of Joburg in the last few days by proposing a model for a change in the grid system. And that's, of course, going to take money, but it's at least a way to protect the most vulnerable among us. And those are people that are in hospitals, old age facilities. And so I think a much more nuanced kind of plan rather than the kind of blanket approach that suggests that decision-making is only made at the top. There needs to be a nuanced approach that is locally specific to municipalities, to different neighborhoods, and as you say, to different areas that might be much more poverty-stricken than other areas. Because we're worried about ironing the clothes or watching TV or the Wi-Fi, but there's other people who have lived without electricity and continue to do so. And so they need to be brought up into the conversation and not exist as if they are simply outside of it.
Yeah. Absolutely, because that's just going to polarize our society more and more. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. That was Dr. Caryn Abrahams, Senior Lecturer at the Wits School of Governance.